Hi, this is Patrick from JDM Gems. Today we're going to be working on a 1992 Honda Street. We're going to be performing a timing belt service, and these are the items we're going to be replacing: timing belt, idler, and the tensioner. So before we begin, I've already jacked up the back of the car, and back end is on jack stands. I've already removed the back wheel on the passenger side, and I've already taken the engine cover off. So the first step, remove this bracket. Loosen the alternator mount, and then the alternator tensioner, and then we'll get started with the front of the motor. For the next part, we're going to be removing the accessory belt cover. It's held on by a handful of metal retaining clips. Best way to take them off is with pliers. Next, we're going to remove this plug, and then just loosen the bolt behind the plug. And your accessory or your alternator belt should slide right out. Next, we're going to be removing the 3 bolts on the dipstick tube. And then just pivot this out the way. Next, we're going to be removing the cover for the AC compressor. And there's 1 bolt on top. Next, we're going to be loosening the bolt that holds the tension for the AC compressor. It's just a 14. It's right back here. You don't have to remove it, just loosen it. That should be enough right there. Then we're just going to loosen this nut until you can get the belt to come off. That should be enough. Just so it's almost all the way off. And then just loosen the nut on the front of that bracket. And then AC belt will come off. Next, we're going to support the engine with the jack. Make sure you have something soft because we're going to be jacking it by the oil pan. Just enough where there's no weight on the engine mount. Now we're going to take the engine mount off. It's just two 14mm bolts and 1 17mm. Next, we're going to be removing the 3 14mm bolts here, and 1 hooked up right there. To get these other 2, I'm going to loosen the jack just a little bit to drop the engine a few inches. Now, just gotta remove the rest of the alternator bolt right here, and the bracket will come out. For the next part, we're gonna lift the engine back up so we can remove this crank pulley bolt. So we're gonna be removing the Harmonic Balancer. It just contains of 1 17mm bolt. You're going to need a 1/2 inch impact. Just flip it off. However, when you're pulling it off, there's a key right here. Make sure that does not fall. Let me show you what I mean. Oh, there it fell. It's just this little key. Next, we're going to be removing the timing belt cover. It consists of an upper and a lower portion. To remove it, there's going to be 3 metal retaining clips and about 5 10mm bolts. So I'll remove those now. So this is going to be a little bit tricky. This is going to get snug up on the alternator right here. So there's the upper cover. And there's a lower cover. So the next part, I'm gonna tighten down this bolt just enough so I could spin the crankshaft. Now I'm gonna be spinning it counterclockwise until the arrow right here lines up with this arrow right here. And I'll show you once it's lined up how it looks. Okay. So you can see there's an arrow right here. It's like a triangle. It's pointing right at this arrow right here. So next we're going to remove the idler and the tensioner. Just loosen them for now. Push it out the way. Slip off the timing belt. So we're going to be tightening the idler to about 33 foot-pounds. So right about there. And the tensioner, I put it hand tight at the loosest setting, so all the way up, so I can slip the timing belt on. Then we'll loosen it to get the tension on it, and we'll tighten it back to about 30 foot-pounds as well. So one trick about putting the timing belt on is I like to turn the crankshaft about an entire tooth clockwise. So that way when we put the belt on and I loosen this tensioner and the tensioner applies the tension, it'll turn the crankshaft one full tooth back and it'll be in alignment. So I'll show you how I do that. Okay, so the timing belt is on. The tensioner still has not applied any tension. Just going to spin this about a full tooth, and you'll see this is going to spin while this stays stationary for like that whole tooth while it gets tighter. Now we'll just tighten this back to about 30 foot-pounds. We should be good to go. So then I like to check to make sure everything's in alignment is I'll get my phone in camera mode and I'll line the marker on the cam with where the valve cover meets the top of the head. And so you'll see that line right there to here. And the same thing you can do the top. You can see those two lines meet up. And then if you go over here, you can see the arrow and the triangle are pointing at each other. So the triangle here is pointing here, so you know everything's in time and we can put everything back together. One thing I also like to do, just to double check, is make sure there's no interference. See if it just spins freely. Try to do one full rotation until the arrows meet up again. And then you're good. So one thing I'm going to do is get some lubricant and apply it to the top of the seal. Since we're going to have to squeeze it in the valve cover, this might go just a little bit easier to get in without the seal popping out. Before putting the covers back on, don't forget to remove this bolt right here. And then put this timing belt guide. The way it's going to work is like a dish. so you're gonna have it outward facing towards the timing belt, kind of like it scoops in the timing belt if you think of it that way. And then we'll put the covers back in. So the best part to do is probably put these in one piece, like one unit, and get the seal underneath the valve cover lip and then kind of push it upwards. That's probably the hardest part of the entire job. So just be patient putting this in. Make sure you're doing everything correctly. And it'll eventually go in. For the next part, we're gonna put the key in the way, this keyway. It's more like a rectangle, so make sure you don't put it long side up. It's pretty obvious which way it goes in. And then you'll put the harmonic balancer on top. And then slide it in, just like so. And you'll get the 17mm bolt. All right. Now we're gonna put the engine mount bracket back on. Before we do that, make sure to put the spacer, just like that, and this little bushing. All that will just slide in there, just like that. Next part, we're gonna put this bolt back into the alternator. Just hand tight. Next, I'm gonna put the engine mount back on. Now, we're gonna jack up the engine so that we can get this aligned with right here, because there's no way I can thread in with it that far. So I had an issue getting this bolt threaded. So what I did is I actually loosened up these two because I had them tight. So loosen it just a little bit if you tighten these down, just to move the engine mount just a little bit to be able to push that bolt in the threads. Next, we can put the alternator belt back on. Damn it, that's wrong. So the first part is the AC belt goes back on. And I'll just put the tensioning bolt up top by hand as much as possible. So next we're going to be turning this nut with a 12mm combo until we get adequate tension on the AC belt. And that's about how tight that tension should be. Next, we're going to be just tightening this bolt. Next, don't forget to tighten this nut on the back of the AC compressor. Next, we're going to put the alternator belt back on. Okay. Next, we're going to tighten the alternator belt. The way it's done is with a pry bar on the ear of the alternator. And we're going to use a 12mm. And let's tighten that one. Tighten down the bracket. Now we're just going to tighten down this alternator mounting bolt. And put the protective covering back in. Okay. Next we're going to be putting the AC compressor cover back on. Again, it's just 3 10 mils. And then we're going to put the bracket back on for the shifter cables. And then pop that back into place. Okay. And now it's just the accessory belt cover. Again, it's held on by the metal clips. Okay. Last but not least, we're going to put the dipstick tube back in. Alright, that's it. So before putting everything back together, make sure the engine's in time. It's an interference motor, so the valves will hit the piston if it's a couple teeth off. There's also a reason why you want to do this service every about 60,000 miles or 100,000 kilometers. Most of these mini trucks are going to have old timing belts, so you're going to want to more than likely do it. I know I've had a lot of requests on doing an Acty timing belt, and I've done about 30 of them at this point. So I hope that this video has helped, and if it has, please subscribe and like the video. And I'll see you on the next repair. Damn it. So before putting everything back together, make sure the engine's in time. So before putting everything back together, this fan is kind of fucking me up. Okay. So before... Everyone's gonna tell me that I'm putting this wire way wrong.